And who still on the floor?
The WNBA is in the middle of a paradox. It's experiencing a golden age of unprecedented growth, shattering viewership records and selling out arenas, all fueled by the arrival of a single generational talent. Yet, beneath the surface of this booming success, a different story is unfolding, one of simmering resentment, questionable calls, and a crisis of leadership that threatens to tear the league apart from the inside. The brightest star in the sport, the very player driving this revolution, has found herself at the center of a storm. The question that has dominated headlines and ignited furious debate among fans is no longer a whisper, it's a roar. Is the most-watched player in the league's history being systematically targeted? And if the answer is yes, is this merely the result of fierce on-court rivalries, a rookie's harsh welcome to the pros? Or is there something far more troubling at play, a pattern of aggression enabled by those in power, a controversy that reaches from the hardwood all the way to the commissioner's office? The evidence suggests this is more than just basketball. This is an unspoken war for the soul of the WNBA, and Caitlin Clark is standing directly on the front line. The first shot in this war was fired on June 1st during a game between the Indiana Fever and the Chicago Sky. It wasn't a spectacular play or a highlight reel moment. It happened away from the ball, just before an inbound pass, a moment that should have been routine. Chicago's Chennedy Carter walked up to Caitlin Clark and delivered a hard, deliberate shoulder check, sending the rookie stumbling to the floor. It was a move that had no place in a basketball game. It was a blindside hit, a clear message. What happened next, however, was even more revealing. The officials on the floor called it a simple away-from-the-ball foul. Clark, visibly stunned, pleaded with the referees to review the play, but her request was dismissed. On the broadcast, commentators were surprised it wasn't deemed anything more than a common foul. To millions watching at home, it was a blatant cheap shot, a non-basketball play that went virtually unpunished in the moment it mattered most. The game continued, but the damage was done. The incident ignited a firestorm online, with fans and analysts alike questioning how such an obvious act of aggression could be so casually dismissed. The league, facing immense public pressure, was forced to act. A full day after the game, the WNBA announced it was upgrading Carter's foul to a flagrant 1 violation, a tacit admission that the officials had gotten it wrong. But the response felt reactive, a move made to quell public outrage rather than a proactive step to protect a player. Chennedy Carter herself added fuel to the fire. In the post-game press conference, she defiantly refused to answer any questions about the incident or about Clark. Later, she would suggest that critics hadn't seen the whole game and the plays that led up to the confrontation, implying her actions were somehow justified. This sequence of events, the aggressive act, the insufficient on-court penalty, the delayed league intervention, and the unapologetic player, created a dangerous precedent. It sent a message throughout the league that the immediate deterrent for overly physical play was weak. Indiana Fever coach Christy Sides stated plainly that it was a non-basketball play that needed to be called in that moment, a sentiment echoed across the sports world. The power to control the game had been ceded by the officials, creating a vacuum where players felt emboldened to test the limits. This wasn't just a foul, it was the genesis of a narrative that would come to define Clark's rookie season, a league that seemed unable or perhaps unwilling to protect its biggest star. If the Chennedy Carter incident had been an isolated event, it might have been dismissed as a one-off moment of aggression. But it wasn't. It was merely the most visible example in a disturbing and undeniable pattern of physical and confrontational play directed at Caitlin Clark from the very start of her WNBA career. The evidence, when laid out, paints a picture not of isolated rivalries but of a consistent league-wide phenomenon. The tension was palpable from her very first professional game on May 17th against her longtime college rival Angel Reese and the Chicago Sky. In the third quarter, Clark committed a hard foul on Reese to prevent an easy layup, sending her to the floor. Reese immediately sprang to her feet and aggressively moved towards Clark, needing to be restrained by teammates. After a review, officials upgraded Clark's foul to a flagrant 1. In a move that baffled many, recent Fever center Alea Boston, who had stepped in to de-escalate, were given offsetting technical fouls. The WNBA later released a statement from the crew chief, justifying the calls with technical language about wind-up, impact, and follow-through. But for many viewers, the explanation felt hollow and failed to address the aggressive escalation from Reese. Just over a month later, on June 18th, the Fever faced the Connecticut Sun in a game that would devolve into a series of ugly altercations. In the third quarter, the Suns' J.C. Sheldon inadvertently hit Clark in the face. Clark retaliated with a shove, a minor act that was met with a wildly disproportionate response. The Suns' Marina Mabrey charged in and forcefully shoved Clark to the ground. Once again, the league's initial response was seen as inadequate. Mabrey was given a technical foul on the court, but only after the game, and another wave of public outcry did the WNBA upgrade the penalty to a flagrant 2 foul, which comes with an automatic fine. The targeting wasn't always so overtly violent. During a May 30th game against the Seattle Storm, Clark got into a heated verbal exchange with guard Victoria Vivians after hitting a three-pointer. The two bumped and had to be separated by officials, resulting in double technical fouls. It was another instance of an opponent initiating a confrontation with Clark that went beyond the normal bounds of competitive fire. This relentless series of incidents prompted Fever coach Christy Sides to take matters into her own hands. She revealed that she was consistently sending video clips of questionable plays to the league office, a clear sign that the team felt their concerns were not being adequately addressed by the on-court officials. It was a desperate, behind-the-scenes plea for the league to recognize the pattern that everyone else could see so clearly. This timeline reveals a critical failure in the league's officiating. In nearly every significant incident, the initial on-court penalty was insufficient, requiring the league office to step in and upgrade the fouls after the fact. This reactive approach, rather than a proactive one, created an environment where aggression was implicitly tolerated in real time, leaving the league's brightest star to absorb the consequences. As the pattern of physical play became impossible to ignore, a powerful and persuasive theory began to take hold to explain the why behind it all: jealousy. It was a narrative that suggested veteran players resented the unprecedented attention, media coverage, and endorsement deals that a rookie was receiving, and they were expressing that resentment on the court. This theory might have remained in the realm of fan speculation, if not for the intervention of some of the biggest names in basketball. The most explosive endorsement of this theory came from NBA Hall of Famer Charles Barkley. In a segment that went viral, Barkley did not mince words. "LeBron, you are 100% right on these girls hating on Caitlin Clark. Y'all petty girls," he declared. He argued that instead of being resentful, WNBA players should be thanking that girl for getting y'all a private charters, all the money and visibility she brings into the WNBA. Barkley's blunt assessment was a watershed moment. He used his massive platform to legitimize the fan-led narrative, framing the issue as one of petty jealousness and calling on players to recognize the financial benefits Clark was bringing to the entire league. Barkley was amplifying a sentiment that had been simmering since before the season even began. The first sign of veteran resistance came from WNBA legend Diana Taurasi, who in a preseason interview issued a stark warning to the incoming rookie class, stating that reality is coming. The comment was widely interpreted as a signal that Clark would not receive a warm welcome from the league's established stars. While Taurasi would later soften her stance and offer high praise for Clark's talent and resilience, her initial words set a confrontational tone that seemed to predict the physical reception Clark would endure. The jealousy narrative wasn't just an outsider's perspective, it was corroborated by those inside the Fever locker room. Clark's teammate Lexi Hall spoke candidly about the dynamic in an interview, confirming that they felt a target on their backs. "I think there is a level of jealousy when it comes to the Fever just because of the media attention and the fans that have shown up for us ever since Caitlin got here," Hall stated. "We've heard people and players and teams talking in their locker room about, 'We can't let the Fever win.'" This was a stunning admission, providing an insider's confirmation of the theory that had been swirling in the media. Even other NBA stars weighed in, offering a more nuanced take on the resentment. Los Angeles Clippers star Paul George explained that it was understandable that some longtime WNBA players would be offended when a rookie is essentially handed being the face of the league after they had been grinding for all of this for years. His analysis framed the issue not just as petty jealousy, but as a complex professional dynamic rooted in the struggle for recognition and respect. However, while the jealousy narrative provided a simple and compelling motive, it also conveniently shifted the focus away from a deeper, more systemic problem. By framing the controversy as an interpersonal issue between players, it allowed the league to sidestep tougher questions about its own failures in officiating and leadership. While player motives dominated the headlines, a growing chorus of voices began to argue that jealousy, resentment, or any other emotion was irrelevant. The real failure, they contended, was not on the players testing the boundaries, but on the officials who failed to enforce them. The opportunity for this pattern of aggression was being created by a systemic breakdown in officiating, a crisis of competence and authority that was being called out on the league's own broadcasts. The most damning indictment of the officiating came from ESPN's Rebecca Lobo, a former WNBA star and respected analyst. During a national broadcast of a Fever game, Lobo and her broadcast partner Ryan Ruocco broke down a replay of several defensive plays on Clark. As the footage rolled, showing grabs, holds, and bumps that went uncalled, Lobo's frustration was evident. "There's a grab, there's a hold, there's another grab. I mean, all of those are fouls. Every single one of them," she stated plainly. It was a shocking moment of public accountability, with a league broadcast partner essentially telling a national audience that the referees were not doing their jobs. This on-air criticism mirrored the private frustrations of the Indiana Fever's coaching staff. Coach Christy Sides' admission that she was regularly sending clips of missed calls to the league office was more than just a complaint. It was evidence of a broken system. It implied that the on-court dialogue with officials was so ineffective that the only recourse was a desperate, after-the-fact appeal to their superiors. The league's response to these incidents only highlighted the disconnect. After major altercations, the WNBA would release official statements from crew chiefs filled with technical jargon about foul criteria that seemed entirely detached from the visceral, common-sense reality of the plays that millions of fans had witnessed. This created a perception that the league was more concerned with defending its officials than with acknowledging obvious errors. This perception was solidified when the league took action not against the referees, but against the players who dared to criticize them. Caitlin Clark herself was fined $200 for a post on social media that was critical of the officiating after a playoff game. While the fine was monetarily insignificant for a star of her stature, its symbolic weight was enormous. It sent a chilling message throughout the league. The WNBA was more interested in policing player speech about the problem than in actually fixing the problem itself. This combination of public criticism, private frustration, and punitive measures against dissent eroded the referee's authority entirely, creating a chaotic on-court environment where the official rulebook seemed to be merely a suggestion. The controversy surrounding Caitlin Clark had already exposed deep cracks in the WNBA's foundation, from player resentment to a full-blown officiating crisis. But the entire narrative was about to be supercharged by a bombshell allegation that shifted the focus from the court to the very top of the league's corporate ladder. What if the problem wasn't just incompetent officiating or jealous players? What if the dismissive sentiment on the court was secretly being echoed in the commissioner's office? The accusation came from one of the league's most respected players, Minnesota Lynx star and WNBPA representative Napheesa Collier. During a stunning end-of-season press conference, Collier went public with a private conversation she claimed to have had with WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert. According to Collier, when she raised concerns about player issues, Engelbert's response was shockingly dismissive, particularly regarding the league's biggest star. Collier alleged that Engelbert told her that Caitlin Clark should be grateful she makes $16 million off the court, because without the platform the WNBA gives her, she wouldn't make anything. The statement was an absolute bombshell. It was a direct accusation made on the record by a current All-Star, suggesting that the leader of the WNBA held a contemptuous view of her most valuable asset. The alleged comment implied that the league saw Clark's immense off-court success not as a shared victory, but as a reason to downplay her value and dismiss concerns about her on-court treatment. This revelation created a damning portrait of hypocrisy. Publicly, Commissioner Engelbert had acknowledged officiating concerns, assuring fans and media that the league was on it and that consistency was something they needed to evaluate. But Collier's allegation painted a picture of a private attitude that was anything but concerned. The implications were staggering. If the person in charge of the league truly believed that Clark should just be grateful for her endorsement deals, it could explain the systemic inaction that had allowed the physical targeting to fester. It suggested a potential top-down culture of indifference, one that didn't prioritize player safety or fair play, especially for a star whose off-court earnings dwarfed her league salary. This wasn't just a rumor, it was a calculated accusation from a prominent voice in the players' union, delivered in a formal setting. Collier had strategically transformed the public debate about Caitlin Clark's treatment into a much larger battle over labor, respect, and the fundamental value of players in the eyes of the league they were making more popular than ever. The alleged comment became the potential smoking gun, suggesting the rot might just start at the top. Amid the chaos and the pervasive narrative of everyone versus Caitlin, a powerful and nuanced counter-narrative was quietly being forged by the league's biggest stars themselves. To paint the entire league with a broad brush of jealousy would be a lie. In fact, one of the most important alliances of the season was formed not out of rivalry, but out of a profound and public display of mutual respect that challenged the very foundation of the media-driven controversy. The moment came when Caitlin Clark, in a landmark interview with Time magazine, addressed the complex racial dynamics at play in her rise to fame. With remarkable self-awareness, she acknowledged her own position in the ecosystem of the sport. "I want to say I've earned every single thing. But as a white person, there is privilege," Clark stated. She went on to say that the WNBA has kind of been built on the black players who were its foundation for decades. It was a critical moment where Clark herself actively dismantled the simplistic white savior narrative that some had tried to impose on her. Her words did not go unnoticed. They drew a powerful and heartfelt response from the reigning WNBA MVP, Las Vegas Aces superstar A'ja Wilson. In her own interview with Time, Wilson called Clark's comments powerful. She explained the deep significance of having a white counterpart use her platform to advocate for Black players. When we can have our counterparts speak up, it speaks volumes to me, because they're in spaces where my path is never supposed to go, Wilson said. She spoke of the struggles Black women face in the league, the feeling of having to work 10 times harder just to be seen, and the meaning of having someone hold that door open for us to walk through. This public exchange was a masterclass in solidarity. At a time when the media was eager to frame them as rivals competing for the spotlight, Clark and Wilson refused to play their assigned roles. They bypassed the simplistic jealousy angle and engaged in a sophisticated and necessary conversation about race, privilege, and representation in their sport. Their alliance was a quiet rebellion against the external forces trying to pigeonhole them into a divisive narrative. It demonstrated that the true conflict was not necessarily between the players themselves, but between the players and a media structure that often thrives on simplistic, racially coded storylines. While other stars like Breanna Stewart maintained a more traditionally competitive but professional relationship with Clark, the Clark-Wilson dynamic proved that the league's most influential figures were capable of a level of nuance and respect that the surrounding controversy often lacked. The controversy swirling around Caitlin Clark grew so intense that it eventually broke the confines of the WNBA world, drawing in two of the most powerful and influential voices in all of sports, LeBron James and Charles Barkley. Their involvement was a crucial turning point, transforming a league-specific issue into a mainstream sports scandal that was impossible for anyone to ignore. Their commentary served as the final, undeniable validation that what was happening to Clark was not just business as usual. LeBron James, a figure Clark herself has called her idol, and the GOAT consistently used his platform to offer support. When Clark's season was cut short by injury, James was one of the first to send a public message of encouragement, writing, "Minor setback for a major comeback. Rest up, get healthy, and be you." Coming from one of the most scrutinized athletes in history, his support was more than just a kind gesture. It was a significant cosign from basketball royalty, a recognition of the immense pressure she was under. If LeBron was the voice of regal support, Charles Barkley was the voice of the outraged public. He became the controversy's most relentless and vocal critic, launching a crusade against what he saw as unacceptable behavior from WNBA players and inaction from the league. He repeatedly hammered home his point about petty jealousness, but his criticism went even deeper. In one of his most scathing indictments, Barkley declared that the league's players could not have fed this Caitlin Clark thing up, even worse if they tried. He positioned himself as the unfiltered truth teller, saying what many fans were thinking but what few with a platform of his size dared to say so bluntly. The intervention of these two icons was significant, not just for what they said, but for the audience they reached. LeBron James and Charles Barkley command the attention of a massive global sports demographic that may not have been following the day-to-day drama of the WNBA. Their commentary legitimized the concerns of dedicated WNBA fans and broadcast them to the entire sports world. This amplification made the issue unavoidable for the league and its commissioner. Subtly, however, their involvement also highlighted a persistent legitimacy gap in women's sports. The fact that it took the validation of established male superstars for the controversy to be taken seriously by the mainstream media is a commentary in itself, suggesting that the voices of the WNBA's own players, coaches, and analysts were not deemed sufficient on their own. The evidence is overwhelming, and the narrative is clear. Caitlin Clark's inaugural season in the WNBA was defined as much by the controversy surrounding her as it was by her historic performance on the court. We've seen an undeniable pattern of physical targeting, from cheap shots away from the ball to aggressive confrontations that have consistently crossed the line of normal, competitive basketball. We've witnessed a crisis in officiating where referees have lost control of games, forcing the league into a reactive cycle of post-game punishments that do little to deter the on-court behavior. We've heard the motive of jealousy, a theory amplified by basketball legends who argue that veteran players resent the rookie, who has become the face of their league. And most disturbingly, we've been presented with a bombshell allegation that suggests this dismissive attitude may start at the very top, with a commissioner who allegedly believes her biggest star should simply be grateful for the platform she's been given. This isn't just one issue, it's a multifaceted crisis of culture, leadership, and authority. The irony is that all of this is happening at the moment of the league's greatest triumph. The Caitlin Clark effect is real. She is a golden goose, a generational talent who has delivered on every ounce of hype, driving unprecedented growth in viewership, ticket sales, and national media attention. She has handed the WNBA a golden ticket, an opportunity to elevate itself to a new stratosphere of professional sports. This leaves the league standing at a critical crossroads, facing a question that will define its future. Can the WNBA get its house in order? Can it rise to meet this moment of historic opportunity by implementing stronger officiating, fostering a culture of professional respect, and ensuring its leadership is committed to protecting all of its players, especially its brightest star? Or will it allow internal politics, weak officiating, and a failure of vision to sabotage its own success, squandering the greatest gift it has ever been given? The future of women's basketball may very well hang in the balance.